So your name is Meaghan Martin, and you are the founder of Sleep Tight. And in my experience, and I've been writing inspiring stories and doing these interviews for a few years now. In my experience, the motivation always comes from a very personal place.
Very
And
true.
I feel so honored to be able to, to sit across from people like you, who have used some of your own personal suffering to create greater good for others in the community and, across the country and across North America. So I'd love to start with your story. You were 14 when you left home in the middle of the night
Yep.
in the dead of winter. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So I grew up in a pretty interesting home. There was a lot of physical and emotional abuse as I grew up. My mother still is an alcoholic, so we moved around quite a bit. Very unstable childhood. So I got to a point where I started reaching out, talking to people about what was happening at home, and realized that there were some resources in place for me, such as Children's Aid Society, that I could reach out to get help. And I think as soon as I started realizing that life at home was not the norm, I started to get more courage and maybe a bit more brave. And so one night when it just was very hostile environment, I was in a literally physical altercation with my mother. I just fled the home and I didn't have anything to wear. I was literally wearing a sweater. I grabbed my boots because it was February, and I ran to a friend's home. And from there, I went into a foster home about 2 days later. The thing is I tend to skip over some parts there because what was so interesting about just even that little experience was when I got to my friend's home and I called this 1-800 number for Children's Aid, and they said, just stay where you are. We'll pick you up and talk to you tomorrow. Well, I got picked up in a police car.
Mhm.
And, um, you know, in hindsight, I didn't think too much of it, except I was kind of embarrassed. I was in a really small rural town and there was only one OPP station. And here I am in the back of a cruiser being driven through during the day to be interviewed by a police officer. And so I think about that now more when I do a lot of advocating for children and youth in care and the whole stigma surrounding it. And that sure didn't help, thinking, they had to pick me up in a police car. So from then I went into my first foster home and I was in foster care. That was around my 15th birthday, actually, when I entered the first home. And I was in the foster care system till I was 21.
Wow. Okay, I haven't heard this full story, so that's
Okay.
so moving. Like I said, I'm very grateful you feel comfortable sharing that with me.
Of course, of course. And I think my comfort is that I've done my work. I've lived through it. I've done work to heal from it. But I feel as if because I'm in a place where I can share that story in a comfortable way, it might help give a voice to others who've been experiencing it or currently are experiencing it. And just, for them to know that there's a way out and that there is help.
Hmm. How do you think you go from a place where, you're a vulnerable teenager who's extremely embarrassed now that you've been, transported in a police car, so people might think you did something wrong, to becoming an adult who heals herself, right? And then decides that she's going to be a spokesperson and she's going to help create change. How does that transition happen?
Not smoothly. You definitely have a lot of bumps in the road for sure. I did a lot of therapy with a lot of different therapists, and I am a big champion for therapy. I think there's different aspects in your life where you need different people to just sort of guide you and help, give you some wisdom and advice. So I'm a big champion for that. But I'd say I just, like you said, I had to do a lot of the healing on my own, though. I did have some people around me that were stable and brought stability into my life. That helped for sure. But there was a point when I was about think it was 24, where I just thought I would help out at the Waterloo Region Children's Aid Society. And I thought they were doing the Tree of Hope, actually. It was their Tree of Hope radiothon. I thought, oh, this would be a great opportunity to, you know, volunteer and see what they're doing. And I was sitting there, and I think I was doing the phone calls, and someone just asked me, well, what brought you here? And I said, well, I actually grew up in foster care. And they were like, oh, and they started asking me questions. And then funny thing, it was George and Tara at the time from a local radio station who heard it, and they're like, you have to come on and talk about this the next morning. So that's literally, they provided this little platform for me, and that's where I found my voice. And I always give them kudos, because that's really where it started for me.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Sleep Tight is a grassroots campaign that started as a pajama fundraiser in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, how did you get to a place where you were like, I'm going to start just collecting pajamas, and why pajamas?
So with Sleep Tight itself, I actually, I was watching a documentary called Red Light, Green Light, I think it was. And it was talking about human trafficking within Canada, and specifically Ontario. Now, I had already known human trafficking and sex trafficking existed, but to know about it being so close to me was just, I was flabbergasted. And they were talking about, you know, these women who were being brought into shelters and these safe houses. And suddenly a memory came to mind when I entered my first foster home. And like I said earlier, I literally had nothing when I fled. So that first night, the foster parents, they went out and they got me a few items. It was my birthday, so it was like my birthday present too. And one of the items was this brand new pair of pajamas. And I was taken back to that moment, because when I got that pair of pajamas, it had been so long since I had something so new, so fresh, but it was so warm, so comforting, and it brought hope in that moment that things were going to get better from here. And I thought, you know what? What if they came into the shelter and safe house and had a fresh pair of pajamas, and they also felt comfort and hope? And that's really how it started. I went on I think it was my Twitter and my Facebook pages, and I said, hey, I'm thinking of collecting a few pairs of pajamas, going out and buying some. If anybody wants to, you can let me know and I'll pick them up. Well, it was 24 hours later and I had like 50 messages. So the thing just blew up. People loved the idea. It was just before Christmas. And I think that's also a time where you think about warm, cozy pajamas. So it was a couple days in and I realized this thing is really taking off. So I reached out to Chief Brian Larkin of WRPS, and I thought, because there's such a connection there with police and human trafficking, and I knew they were trying to do a lot of work in that area, thought what a great way if we could have people just drop them off at police stations, because they're open 24 hours and there's that connection there. And they did. And so that first year we had over, I think, 500 pairs of pajamas that were collected. And the second year we had 2,500 pairs of pajamas. So it grew.
What I love most about listening to you tell your story is that I think the powerful underlying message here is that one person can create major change.
Yeah.
And like you said, that small idea can become something so much bigger. Was there ever a moment where it felt heavy to you? Like, whoa, this is way bigger than I thought it was going to be, and now I got to keep it going.
Probably not the first year. I was just like, I think I was all glossy-eyed and like, all right, let's do this. And so many people were behind it. And it was such a tangible ask for people that they, like you said, it was so easy to go and pick up a pair of pajamas. I'd say probably year 2, because it was so big the first year. I thought, oh, wow, like how are we really going to pull this off? And not only that, I was then starting to hear the stories and get connected with different people working right on the front lines and hearing from survivors and their stories. So that's when it started to get heavy, not in a bad way, but just that realization. And also the correlation between human and sex trafficking and foster care. Because that's where I came from, I was becoming more and more aware of how those two correlate, because those young people are so vulnerable and are in a place where they just want to feel loved and accepted. And that is something traffickers really hold on to, and that's how they pull them in. So knowing that too, I also I felt this need to take this platform that I was so generously being given and raise awareness as well for those in foster care and the child welfare system.
I feel like the stories of human trafficking kind of get buried, and I don't know if it's because we don't want to hear it, because it's too scary, right? Or that's not us, that's not our neighborhood, that's not our community. What is it? Like in the simplest form, how would you explain what human trafficking is? And like you said, is there a direct correlation to people who've been in foster care or people who are lost, young girls who are specifically lost?
I would say for sure. I think what was interesting for the first year I did Sleep Tight was that a lot of people didn't want to talk about it,
Mm,
about human trafficking. And it was brand new for them to realize that what this happens here. Like I had people argue with me and say, no, it doesn't happen in Waterloo region. It doesn't happen. It happens in Toronto and big places. I'm like, no, it happens here. So I
mm,
think that was really interesting because I started to see that conversation really stir up, and in every year after it just grew. And I think you can almost look now and see how we have an anti-human trafficking network that has been developed through SASC, and you have more work within Waterloo Regional Police where they have task force that are geared towards this. So this conversation has grown, and it's amazing to see. Now, in terms of what it is exactly is it's hard for me to describe because that was probably the hard part for me with doing this, is that I wasn't a victim of human trafficking myself. So I think to go back to the heaviness, it was, did I have to provide some sort of story of my own of that experience? And I didn't have it. So that's where I think Sleep Tight shines, is that I've used it as a place to highlight the groups that are doing the actual on the ground work.
mm.
I'm here to raise awareness on this cause and bring a voice to it, and the correlation with foster care. But this is a place where I was able to talk about Sexual Assault Support Center, talk about the victim services of Waterloo Region, and talk about the one that I've been working with closely now, which is Restorations and their home for survivors. So I took this as a way to be like, hey, there's all these people doing this great work. Let's support them.
We talk about the power of one person. You went from 50 pairs of pajamas to 500 to 5,000 to this beautiful venue that is sold out,
Yeah.
full of community leaders and powerful voices like you're talking about now in organizations. Um, how did you get there as one person? And has it helped you? I mean, what have you been able to take away from this experience?
So I would say it's never been one person. It's I had the idea, but the community rallied around me, and this has been a community event. I feel like there's a lot that I take on for sure, but at the end, when you go into that event every year and you see that room full of people, that's not about me. That's about people having this heart and drive to come out and make a difference. So um, I'd say like how that kind of came about was the first year we had a little drop in where people brought their pajamas, and then this idea thought, why not have a pajama party? And
Mhm.
it's something that was new and fresh and not really done before. So it was a way to kind of get people into a room and talk about something that no one really wants to talk about or hear about, while also raising money and collecting pajamas and having a good time too. So it was kind of, we were teasing them, come on in, come for free food, but also you're going to learn about something.
And it's just so smart. I mean, all of it is so smart. It blows my mind that, like I said, this went from a social media post looking for pajamas. And I think an inspiration to others who are looking for ways to help, or a simple way to assist a grassroots campaign like yours. Talk to me about 2020. Everyone has faced some sort of obstacle, and I know your event ended up not going through or happening in 2020. Tell me about how that's given you some more time to maybe rethink and reassess and build it up for 2021.
Yeah, well, I kind of knew and shared around August that we were just not going to be able to do sleep tight. It just didn't feel like the safe thing to do. Um, and I had had some big changes in 2020, even before all this pandemic stuff happened, is I moved to Toronto. So I knew that was going to be a shift for me in how sleep tight was going to go on. But then seeing everything that happened, it just didn't feel like it was the right time to be asking people to, give money and come out to an event that just didn't feel safe. So we did do a little like I did a small campaign of sorts, a social media campaign where we did have people post a picture of themselves in pajamas or a throwback from a pajama party, and every post generated a $10 donation to Restorations, the charity I support, and that was all thanks to Walter Fady. But the reason I did that is it was almost a time where I personally needed a little bit of a lift.
Mm.
And I thought, I'm sure there's a lot of other people that could use that lift too, and think, gosh, I can just post a photo and I'm making a difference. And I think that's what it created. And like you said, it's been a time to really think about the future of Sleep Tight. And I did mention this in the summer, is that I am looking at having Restorations take more of a prominent role with Sleep Tight,
Mm.
because I've done it for 7 years now. I love it. But because there's been, career changes for me and moves and stuff, I'd love to see us work together more and really create a really cool event, and maybe change it up a little bit. I think we're still talking about it and figuring it out. And I think 2021 still looks kind of blurry right now.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say, but it's definitely not dying. It's not going away. It's just going to come back different.
Tell me about, so it's called Restoration's Second Stage Homes, and they are an
Mhm.
organization that support victims of human trafficking. Is that correct?
Correct. They have some programs, but their main goal has been to create a home for survivors. So, a place for them to come in, get programming, get support, get back on their feet again, instead of just, having survivors come in to a shelter and then off you go. This is a way for them to get healing and grow and uh, find their self-worth again. And so I've always loved their concept. I loved what they've been doing, and they were just an easy charity to support and get behind. And they've actually, in the last year, opened up their home. It's been completed, the construction, which Sleep Tight's funds have really helped to create that home, which is really, really
Mhm.
cool. But yeah, the work they're doing is it's fantastic.
Are you familiar with how many pairs of pajamas you have actually raised to date? Do you know the number?
I would say we're probably in the 10,000 range.
Wow,
Yeah.
very cool.
It
So
I
what
it is really neat, and I think, I was really trying to be very aware of the impact it was having and how it could easily have a negative impact as well, because as you know, charities, they can get inundated with stuff,
mm,
and that is sort of why the shift happened within, a couple years for Sleep Tight to become a ticketed event where we're raising money, because we were getting every year it was like higher and higher amounts of pajamas, but I didn't want to flood charities and nonprofits with pajamas that they just couldn't get out the door fast enough. And
yeah.
I know money is really where it's at. So every year after we maybe raised 200, 300 pajamas, collected that much, but we've also raised much needed money and awareness.
Mm. So we've talked about what the future of Sleep Tight looks like. Tell me about when you go to bed at night, how you feel about all you've been able to accomplish. I know, at 14 years of age, I have a 14-year-old daughter right now. The
Mm.
thoughts of her, I mean, I could cry talking about it. The thoughts of her leaving this home and never coming back. I mean, I don't like when she goes for a walk with her friends. That's such a vulnerable age. And how do you now, after the 7 years that you've invested in this campaign and watch it, become the success that it is, do you look back on that and feel like that's some closure for you? Is that you're able to put some of that negativity away?
I've never thought about it actually. I think I think what I look back on and think of is how grateful I am that it created a platform for me to talk about my own personal story,
Mm,
to provide a voice for those who have similar ones, and to also be more involved with advocating for children and youth in foster care and those who've aged out. I'm a part of a group called the Child Welfare Political Action Committee. I have been for about 4 years now. And that group of us are all those with lived experience in the child welfare system. And for us, we've been recipients of items and money for certain things here and there, but what we want now is policy change,
mm,
so that children and youth going into the system, their outcomes are being tracked. There's resources for them that make sense when they're aging out, because when I aged out at 21, no one checked in on me.
mm,
I had great, phenomenal foster parents who adopted me at 18, but I didn't have an agency after 21. It was, okay, you're on your own. And
mm,
so, how do you know that what you did worked? And so, we're really trying to create changes in the system, that help with that, to ensure that these youth have bright futures ahead of them. Because I think statistics don't lie. It's dark and dreary. It's not good. But if we come alongside them with the proper resources, they have incredible futures ahead.